our cemetery. So just to let you know who's presenting with me tonight, Freddie and Laura and John Christian, and then Jeff, my colleague next to me here. Each one of us being founders for the cemeteries that we are working at, and also founders for the Conservation Burial Alliance. When we collectively learned about one another, we recognized that the field was relatively small, and it made a lot of sense to be communicating with one another about the challenges and the lessons learned for the work that we were doing. And so in that space, we decided that it would be helpful to create the Conservation Burial Alliance, which we're now grateful has a number of members, and all of us trying to learn together and share resources over time. Many of you probably have seen the Conservation Burial Alliance website. Our fearless leader, Lee Webster, was very instrumental in helping us set this up, and you'll find lots of resources on this website, as well as contact information for all of us too, if you want to reach out afterwards. So we can't do any presentations about the CBA without a nod to Billy and Kimberly Campbell. I'm sure many of you have heard their names in the past. We lovingly refer to them as the godparents of conservation burial throughout the US. And here they are actually at Laura's cemetery in Florida. We had an occasion to have a retreat together and caught this lovely shot of them. So this is actually where we start as people who are focused on conservation. These are a few of the elements that are appealing to us and that we work to protect and conserve. I'm sure that many of these headings here are probably very familiar to you. And in our presentation to the land trust community, one of the things we were wanting to demonstrate was how aligned our work as conservation burial operators is with the mission and the vision of many land trusts who are also working to support healthy ecology, habitat, wildlife connectivity, and all of these other headings here. In addition to thinking about the conservation pieces for each one of our projects, we're also practicing natural burial. And we're figuring out how for each one of us, we do it a little bit differently, but how we have integrated that into the conservation practices that we have on the land. I'm sure none of you need to be reminded that these are the features that define natural burial: no embalming, no steel or metal caskets, no vaults, and no chemicals. I think one of the things we all really love to reinforce as well is the incredibly beautiful, meaningful, personal way in which natural burial invites people into participation in that act, whether it's inviting someone onto the land and helping them find the right plot for themselves, or whether it's helping them craft a memorial service for their loved one, or even lowering their loved one into a grave. Those are all critical pieces for all of us in terms of supporting families and people in our cemeteries. So these are some of the images that were not so appealing to us, in contrast to these several images that we have here, which are probably very familiar for many of you. And oftentimes when we've invited people to Bluestem and talk about what's possible on our property, that folks will have an image such as this one in their minds. And this ultimately, for me personally, is indicative of what is happening in many of our cemeteries, where we're running out of resources in order to manage them. They're filled with metals and concrete and embalming fluids. And as conservationists, that is distressing, to say the least. And so our goals really are to help find ways in which we're reimagining cemeteries and having them look more like this, which is a beautiful scene from Florida near Freddie's Prairie Creek Preserve. Or this one, a lovely overview of Larkspur's beautiful woods. And this one near, possibly even in Laura's Heartwood Preserve. And then this one of the creeks that is on our property in Cedar Grove, North Carolina, where Bluestem is situated. So I think that's probably pretty clear just based on these images. These are the natural resources that we care to protect and that we feel grateful that we can support in the spaces that we are operating in addition to doing natural burial with families. So just a quick snapshot of some of the conservation burial grounds around the country. I learned in quick correspondence with Lee that we are at the total number of about 16 conservation cemeteries across the country. So they're unique. They are very time consuming. We believe that they're very deliberate projects that require a great deal of not only financial resource, but also the right piece of land. And then also neighboring interests. You always want to be thinking about the folks who abut your property. And then also community support are some of the critical pieces in terms of thinking about these projects. I like the little circle around the Southeast because I feel fairly proud now being in the Southeast that there are a good number of these projects in our region. And just a quick slide to share with you all some of the critical components for conservation cemeteries. When we're presenting this information to land trusts, we have found them to be curious about conservation cemeteries, but not always embracing of the idea. And I think part of the reason for that is that they have imagined a fair amount of risk is involved in supporting a conservation project. So we've tried to help them understand that there are different roles that conservation organizations can play, but truly the most important role that they can play with a conservation cemetery is this final point here where they would be holding the conservation easement over the property, which is what gives conservation cemetery its weight, its depth, its value. So there's just a quick summary of where we're going tonight. And now I will turn it over to each one of my colleagues so they can share a little bit more deeply about their own projects. And we thank you so much for being here and for holding your questions. And if you'd like, you could start dropping them into the chat, and we're going to make sure that we've left plenty of room at the end of the presentation to answer your questions. So thank you so much. And Freddie, it's all yours.
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you very much, and thank you for the beautiful start. I'll just start with Prairie Creek Conservation Cemetery was the 4th certified conservation burial ground in the nation. And really how that came about was through the inspiration, shared vision, and enthusiasm of a very engaged community. And particularly for me, my friend Larry, at a community vegetarian potluck, I didn't realize that I was going to this potluck to get, a planted seed in me, but Larry gave a presentation. I had no idea he was going to do it, about his experience of visiting one of the first conservation burial grounds in the nation. And when he got through with that presentation, I was very, very inspired and compelled for action. So I got Larry, and we met with a friend of mine who at the time was the executive director of Alachua Conservation Trust, our local, wonderful, amazing land trust, which we call ACT. And we met with my friend Robert Hutchinson, who at the time was the executive director. And at the end of that meeting, we had sowed the seed in Hutch as well. So we went on to start a nonprofit cemetery company, a 501c13. It's called Conservation Burial Inc., or CBI. And then eventually our friend came and her name is Kathy Cantwell, Dr. Kathy Cantwell, a well-known environmentalist throughout the Southeast, really. And she let us know that she wanted us to get on the ball and become operational because we had researched for 3 years, meeting once a month on research and planning. And I think there was a case of paralysis analysis. But anyway, she said she was dying with a brain tumor. We had about 2 months to get her as the first person buried there, and we did that. I think it was very confirming how all of it came about because the the um, the model, the structural model of Prairie Creek Conservation Cemetery is actually Alachua Conservation Trust as the landowner, Alachua County through their program Alachua County Forever, which is taxpayers pay for this conservation program here. And Alachua County holds the easement from ACT for for the conservation easement of Prairie Creek Conservation Cemetery. CBI is the operators. So it's a three-way win, and it has been community from start to finish. I think the other thing in terms of the land itself, it's 93 acres that is Prairie Creek Conservation Cemetery, but that 93 acres is within 606 acres or so of Prairie Creek Preserve. So it's a pretty huge preserve with the cemetery in it. And then there's more because that preserve is contiguous with over 20,000 acres of Paynes Prairie State Park. There's not like it's all connectivity here. And there's even more, which we don't have time for me to go into, but there's a rails to trails that's connected to that. The land itself is made up of several ecosystems, not so easy to put a distinct characteristic, but there's a lot that is mesic hammock system. There's also meadows that we're restoring to be upland pine, like an upland pine system. There's also a cypress swamp that has its own kind of ecosystem with lots of water birds, alligators, snakes. I've even seen a river otter. I won't be able to think of all the things there, but imagine that you have an area of forest area and you have the meadow area and you have this adjacent cedar swamp. So early on, the the land was not, before ACT saved it from development, which was a wonderful thing. The land had some serious insults to it from things like certain areas of the forest were cleared for small farming areas, and the meadows were heavily grazed with cattle. It was also pretty frequently mowed. So there was a fair amount of insult and degradation to the land, but it was still wonderful to get because that was one of the things that we wanted to do is the restoration, and that has been going wonderful. We've removed a lot of trees that were very opportunistic in those areas that some of the forest was cleared, and they were trees that are fast growing. And we continue to remove some of those, like laurel oak, water oaks, and sweet gums. But we're also doing an amazing amount of replanting. And in the meadows, we do rotational burns every year. Our team, our staff are certified to do that. And also ACT is involved at times, and they're just a great partner in terms of land management because they have so many skills and knowledge. So we work really well together on that. The cemetery has like 30 acres that's designated, and 30 acres is kind of ballpark, but 30 acres that's designated for burials. That leaves over 60 acres we're not going to do burials, but we're doing amazing restoration with all of that. And in terms of the meadows, one of the featured kind of exciting things that we've been doing is a native wildflower restoration area. And we actually we're in the process of doing that in a bigger way in a whole nother northern part of the meadows. So there we're creating this habitat for pollinators. We have, among other things, doing plantings of milkweed. We already have monarch butterflies, but we hope to increase that population. The native wildflower, some of the wildlife, and this goes for, I was just thinking of one of them in that area is gopher tortoise. Is that right? Yeah, I think that's right. And I don't know if you're familiar with pocket gophers, but we have some of those guys. And there's plenty, in general, the landscape and the ecosystems are supporting an enormous amount of diversity of plants, fauna and flora. Some of the wildlife that maybe I haven't mentioned yet is deer, wild turkey, bobcats. Maybe I did mention alligator, snakes, but we have eagles, we have obviously hawks, we have sandhill cranes regularly. Occasionally, we have had incidents of black bear coming through, checking us out. So the last part I just want to touch on is that our mission at Prairie Creek is is to provide a natural burial choice that conserves land, but also reunites people to the earth. And that's a very powerful mission if you think in terms of all that it does for benefits for the people and for the planet. One that sometimes I think gets overlooked that I think is particularly valuable is that there is this climate mitigation that just automatically happens by doing that. And the realities of that at Prairie Creek are what we've seen is just the very fact of ACT and Prairie Creek conserving this area and managing it. It creates this place for the community and for all of nature that it constantly gets water and air for free filtered, and it's continuous, and it's also in terms of nature it's perfect. Another area, all of the restoration that we're doing and in terms of the burning, planting trees and clearing and putting in more more trees that are appropriate for the ecosystem. All of this is enhancing the carbon capture, which is already going on, even, even with what was there initially, but now it's going to be further enhanced. Another thing is the of what we don't do or what would be done if we weren't there. So imagine at Prairie Creek, which now has, counting burials and folks that plan to be buried there, we're talking thousands, over right now over 2,000 and growing. But all of those choices for something that has all of these benefits for people and planet, and we're talking passive recreation, we're talking everything that I've mentioned, but those choices wouldn't have been there. So that means that there would have been, instead of a premium for climate, there would be a negative for climate. And lastly, it refers to our mission statement, where it says reuniting people with the earth. We do that with feeding the earth physical bodies in a very beautiful way, I might add. I just had that experience today. But the other thing that we do is with living folks and reuniting them oftentimes, or sometimes initially connecting them with the earth and with nature. And it is such a beautiful thing that I get chills when I see that happening. And what that really means for the earth and for climate and for climate mitigation is that means that they have now had an experience. And just like probably most of us, our experiences in nature started young. Well, wherever they start, whenever they start, that's when it happens that we can carry forward and really make a difference with climate action. I thank you, and I now have the great honor and pleasure of introducing Laura Starkey with Heartwood Preserve.
Thanks,
And
Freddie.
Laura, before you
Yes.
go, I want to just make a mention that I feel we've shortchanged the audience with all of the beautiful images that Freddie's describing. So I encourage you to go to their website. Most of all, I encourage you to make a trip to Prairie Creek, but encourage you to go to their website. And also, if you're on social media, they post beautiful photographs of their conservation work on their Instagram feed. So just keep that in mind for everyone. We have not the full extent of everyone's beautiful spaces, but just a few smattering photos for the presentation. Go, Laura.
Thanks. Thank you, Freddie. It's an honor to follow you, Freddie, in your footsteps in many ways. Freddie helped me in many ways as an advisor and friend during the years that it took me to open Heartwood Preserve. So we are about 2 hours south of Prairie Creek in the Tampa Bay area. Heartwood Preserve is in a suburban community called Trinity, which is north of Clearwater. Most people have heard of Clearwater or Tampa or St. Petersburg. We're on the north corner of that Tampa Bay urban region. So we are really on what's called the wildland urban interface. We literally are that interface. I tell people we are right there. A lot of conservation cemeteries are in more rural or remote areas because that's where the conservation lands are and the affordable lands are. We started on this property. I had a unique opportunity as a landowner, member of a landowning family of a cattle ranch that my family's been on since the 1930s, and managed as a cattle ranch as well as just managed as for native woods, as part of it wasn't all pasture land, it was many thousands of acres of natural woods. So I had an opportunity after having learned about conservation burial at a Land Trust Alliance convention many years ago. I think it was probably Billy Campbell giving the presentation, and learned about it, and then fast forward many years, made it happen much later. So, but I want to talk about, that's a whole story. A lot of you guys have already heard that, but I want to talk about the work we do in conservation. As you can see here, the background of this picture is cypress wetlands. It's actually deciduous, so this is actually a wintertime photo of the cypress actually do drop all their needles in the wintertime. So it actually is bare. It's not all tropical in central and South Florida. So, but this area in the front where you see the palmettos and the grasses, this is an area called longleaf pine flatwoods. And the grasses that you see that are all seed heads here are all wiregrass. Can you see my mouse running around, or is that just?
No, but
Oh,
I
but you
could,
can. Okay, yes.
yeah.
So all of that in there, those are some andropogon, but also the finer grass heads. There are seed heads are wiregrass, Aristida stricta, and it is a very important grass in this ecosystem. It only goes to seed if you have fire, and fire during the growing season. So this is an area that we had burned. So again, this is winter, probably taken in December or January. And this is after we had burned the prior June or July, the last summer of this picture, before this picture was taken. So it only is going to seed because we had fire on the landscape. So this is again a fire-based ecosystem that needs that on the landscape, not just to survive, but to thrive. And it really does beautiful work of protecting biodiversity, and just a beautiful, it's just beautiful out there. I'm very partial to it. Do you want to go to the next slide?
Sure. And actually, Laura, let me
Yes.
jump and show the photo of the burn, because that you've
Yes.
done a great job of explaining that. So here people can actually experience it if you want to talk about that.
Right, thank you. And if you see here on the left is where the fire has come through, and you can see some of the flames right in the center of the picture. So it's actually, slowly making its way through the palmettos. The palmettos are those big, thick shrubs. That's a small form of palm, of the palm. So it's very prevalent in this part of Florida. and they have volatile oils in the palm fronds, and so they actually ignite really well when they're big, fluffy green palmettos. So they light through there. The wiregrass burns. All these other plants burn. They burn off the top, but then they regrow from their roots almost immediately, especially because the growing season is our rainy season in Florida. And so usually we get a rain even the same day, if not within a few days after a burn. And that fresh fire coming through, followed by rain, and then the sun and everything, it just starts growing back right away. And if you look at this picture, this was taken, you can see some of the charred pine cones sort of in the, right at about 1 o'clock in that picture. And the ground, you can see some char on the ground. The plaque in the center is one of the plaques, the plaque that we offer for the family to have on their burial space. This was actually, I believe, no, this is a full body burial. So it looks like it could have been a cremation burial, but this is a flower, I say flowers. Flowers was the name of the last name of Mr. Flowers is buried there, but he's covered in beautyberry, growing back, and silkgrass and blackroot, and lots of grasses and wildflowers are growing back there. So this has happened, just within weeks and months after the burn. So we do prescribe burning. Every summer we do a prescribed burn or two, and each area burns on a 3-year rotation, which is what our area, this type of ecosystem, does the best with. So you can see here the palmettos are kind of a little bit higher up because they're probably going to be due to burn in the next year or two, and they'll burn back down, but then they'll grow back up almost within a short amount of time. The tall trees you see in the background are the longleaf pine and slash pine. They have no lower branches. That's one of their ways that they survive fire is they have no lower branches, so that allows for the fire to pass through, and it allows for a very open floor of the forest. So that is part of its evolution as a forest is to allow for an open forest floor, which allows all that sunlight to come down, and the fire opens up the soils exposes the soil by burning off the fuels. It exposes the soil, all of those seeds that just went to seed because we had that fire, they all drop. They've now got room to germinate in the soil. They all grow back. It's just amazing. So it's just this incredible ecosystem that just continues to flourish with that. So it's an important, as you can tell, I love talking about fire. It's a really important tool. It's a really beautiful experience to see the fire and the results of the fire. And it's just a vital part of this land. So that's what we do, but we're also very connected to the community. This is a large sand live oak that is outside behind our welcome center, and this is an actual wedding. This couple came and got a tour of the place, and just a friend's daughter, and she said, well, would you rent it out for, could I have a wedding here? And I said, yes, you can have a wedding here. So they had a wedding there. We were so thrilled. And but it just really is this, and you can see in the background, back in the very background, all of the longleaf pines and the palmettos that I just talked about. So, Heartwood Preserve is our conservation mission is taking care of these flatwoods that are an endangered ecosystem in the United States. They used to cover the longleaf pine used to cover the majority of the southeastern US. There's just a small fraction of the original percentage remaining. So we're a small little corner relative to, the big picture, but what we are doing is teaching people about the importance of that. We also border an 18,000 acre wilderness preserve that is protected, land that's protected by the state of Florida through a couple different agencies. And so that is a public land that is protected. We border that. So we're 41 acres next to, I feel like we're sort of like the little thumbnail off of a large hand of all of this conservation area, permanently protected area. But what we're able to do as a natural cemetery is really share this ecosystem and this place with people who would not have otherwise gone for a walk in the wilderness preserve next door. That's, more of a people who are, seeking out hiking places or camping places. They're going to find Starkey Wilderness Preserve, but this is a place that it's right off of a main road here in this area, so it's easy to find, it's easy to get to. People walk in all the time and saying, I've been wondering about this place. What is it? Or, they have a coworker or a family member that's buried here and they come to one of our services. And it's just we have people that are, I feel like we reach what I would call a very mainstream audience, a very mainstream market of people who find this place because we're right at the corner of a major urban region. And so we are able to reach people that, again, are not outdoorsy necessarily. They're more city folks or suburbanites. And, their idea of the great outdoors is, a drink by the pool or maybe going to the soccer field on a Saturday morning, but not, tromping through the woods and learning about prescribed fire and biodiversity and all of that. But when they come to Heartwood, they drive onto the property and all they know is that they feel relaxed when they pull in this driveway off of the busy road that they just came off of. There's a lot of traffic down here. This place is crazy with development. It's just insane. But they pull off of the road and pull into our driveway. And by the time they get back to the parking area and come back and walk around the cemetery, they just relax and they feel good. And they just know that you all of us here that are in this conversation, we know it. We know that power of nature to just calm the savage beast, calm the soul, and rejuvenate our spirits. So this is a place that people surprisingly come to, and it's again, there's still a lot of people are like, it's not for me, but I understand why Uncle Joe chose this place. I get it because this is right up his alley. Or yes, this is what Mom wanted, and I can see why this is just what she would have wanted. So we are able to reach this audience that I'm excited to be able to share this land that I grew up here. I have deep roots here, and a lot of us in this country don't get the honor and privilege and the blessing of being able to have connection to a place. And I have connection to this place because I'm a third generation person in this land, and in Florida that's pretty rare. So it's beautiful to be able to share that connection with other people. And now people have a connection to this land in all of these cemeteries, all of these places around the country. As Freddie mentioned, we're connected to this land in a deeply spiritual, emotional, and physical way because we're literally going into the ground, or we're planning to go into this soil and be a part of this beautiful place. So it's just really an amazing way that we can share the land with the community. I'm going to now move it over to Larkspur and introduce John Christian Phifer, who is just doing amazing work up in the Nashville area. Take it away, John Christian.
Thank you, Laura, and hello, everybody. Larkspur Conservation started in 2013. We wanted to create a project in our Middle Tennessee community that offered folks an option outside of traditional burial and cremation that also fostered life and protection of our ecosystems and landscapes. Our first property is called Larkspur Conservation at Taylor Hollow, and it is located just outside of Nashville, about 40 miles. We have 161 acres there. It's a mixed mesophytic forest. incredibly biodiverse. It has a unique topography that spans from about 600 feet to 900 feet. So there's a beautiful hillsides and ravines and open prairie meadows, and then of course the beautiful woodlands that people can explore. But because of this particular biodiversity and because of this particular topography, and because of where we're situated in the Appalachian region in the foothills, we see an opportunity for an incredible biodiversity, from interesting things that happen at 600 feet to special things that happen at 900 feet. From those ridge tops to that lower area where the small creeks and streams run through the belly. I will say that we are on unceded land of the Eastern Cherokee, the Shawnee, and the Yuchi, and we are proud stewards of this property now. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. When we were in search for land, which began in 2013 when we established ourselves as a nonprofit, we were searching for land that had been mistreated, might be a good way to say it, and land that needed care and had an opportunity to be restored to a more native landscape before agriculture, before timber harvest, before cattle grazing. And we searched for lands particularly that were adjoining or near other areas that were already under protection or under conservation. Our particular property sits adjacent to 172 acres of forested land owned by the Nature Conservancy. We at the time reached out to the Nature Conservancy, and we had a former board member for the Nature Conservancy on our team, on our board of directors, and we began speaking to them about what we wanted to do. We identified this particular tract, which at the time was 109 acres, and we purchased it from a family who was settling their father's estate. That 109 acres has since grown to 155 and now 161 acres. 155 acres of that are zoned for cemetery and burial use. And we keep a small portion near our entrance for parking of vehicles and gathering of folks. Because one thing that's unique about a conservation easement is, for those of you that may not be aware, and for land trusts that are joining the call, you'll be well aware. It's kind of a guidebook or a rule book that helps protect and safeguard the ecological integrity of the preserve. So it says what type of vehicles can pass over the property. It says if cars can even be parked on the property, and in our case, no. So that's the reason we have that entrance area that is not under conservation, so we can safely bring folks in, park vehicles, and then welcome them into the protected space that's gated. The property has about 5 miles of trail right now. And that conservation easement helps protect how people visit the property. Mindful recreation, that's hiking, walking, nature study, no horseback riding, no motor vehicles, no ATVs. There's a lot of protections that go into play. We also work closely with the Nature Conservancy to develop a forestry plan and a forestry management plan. Also prescribed fire and prescribed burn plans, so that we can care for the land in accordance with methods that are agreed upon through the conservation easement. One thing that's really unique about these projects of conservation burial grounds and land trusts is when you combine the sacred ritual of burial on a beautiful, pristine property where people can connect with the nature and give their person back to nature in this way, it creates a symbiotic relationship between the land trust and the organization operating the burial ground, where our families come to Larkspur and they're very enveloped in this process and in this experience, but their eyes are also opened to the work that the Nature Conservancy is doing. And they have an opportunity to experience this transformational experience through burial, and then be really connected to the landscape in ways that people just can't if you're out for a hike in your favorite state park. You know, to be able to give your loved one back to the land, your own flesh and blood, really really changes someone's relationship with landscape. And it also really reminds people that we all are the earth, and we all are from the planet that we call home. So it gives us even more reason to want to protect as humans, and care for nature in a special way. The Nature Conservancy is very lightly involved. We do a baseline study or update our baseline every year. They'll visit with us and we walk the grounds, we update our baseline. And the baseline is kind of a thing, when I'm talking to folks that aren't super familiar, I'll use that growth chart that your parents or your grandparents had on the wall in their home, where they're like, oh, 3 years old, this is how tall you were. That's similar to what the baseline is enables us to do. We can go throughout the preserve and we can update through photography and visiting all of the sites across the land, how it's growing, how it's changing, how our impact is either helping or hurting. And if it's hurting, we pause, we reassess, and we make changes that will benefit the land. And in most cases, we've always found that it is a true benefit to the landscape. Like Freddie and Laura were saying, we have this opportunity to use our bodies as a tool for restoration of the landscape and the habitat. It helps reinforce the soil layer. We reintroduce these native species, and they can help capture water, prevent runoff, and also pull carbon out of the atmosphere. And they can do that not just one time. In a property like this, it's perpetual. It's year after year. So it's a continued process, year after year after year after year, whether it's a white oak or it's sawgrass in the meadow, that has an opportunity to pull carbon out of the atmosphere and return it to the soil. It's really a special thing. Larkspur does allow for the burial of cremated remains. We have a special process for handling those cremated remains so that they do not harm the environment. We did not write that into our conservation easement. However, I do believe that in future easements that we will place on our additional properties that we have in our, what I call land bank for future growth, those easements may reflect protection for the land from cremated remains, and may even speak to how NOR remains or human composted remains may be cared for, accepted, or not accepted on these particular properties. We do not receive any funding from the Nature Conservancy. Initially, we made a payment to the Nature Conservancy, to their endowment, that would help forever protect our place. Essentially provide them some overhead resources to be able to manage the ecology with us over time. But Larkspur's true role is 100% care for the land and the ecosystem. We do all of that funding ourselves. We care for all of the families that come onto our property, and we also handle all of the funeral preparations with the local funeral home and on site. We have 2 funeral directors on site, on staff, myself and one other, and we're highly involved within creating a change within the funeral systems that are currently out there, and really encouraging evolution within funeral practices. This is a photo of a rare cerulean warbler. We have several breeding pairs that fly from Brazil every year. Their particular habitat is mixed mesophytic forests hardwood deciduous forests, but that also are on ridge lines at a higher elevation. And they will nest in the canopy of the tree. And occasionally, like in this case where one of our photographers captured this image, the birds will come to the forest floor to forage along a healthy understory where a lot of native insects grow and thrive. That is their primary food source. So we're really, really passionate about that little bird. And we have a lot of folks that come out to see it. We do a ton of community work. We've had almost 100 events this year. This particular event was a school group that came to the preserve, and we did an invasive species pool. We have those seasonally as well as planting days. And then we do a ton of community outreach and hikes and bird walks, and you name it, we try to do it. It's just a place that's very alive, and we're very, very proud of Larkspur and what it's growing to become. This particular grave is for a singer, and you can see the wildflowers beginning to grow back there. This is a prairie meadow, mostly of partridge pea, ironweed, flat top goldenrod, tall goldenrod. We've got some bluestem in there, some sugarcane plume grass. And most of the trees that you see around are going to be oaks and tulip poplars and cherry and sassafras and dogwood and redbud, and the list goes on and on. We're incredibly blessed to have so much biodiversity on our site.
I think that might be it for your photos, John Christian.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I think everybody wants to hear from you anyhow. So why don't you take it away, Heidi? Jeff?
We'll let Jeff give the little bit about Bluestem, and then we'll circle back with some photographs. Just to let everyone know, I know we're getting close to 8 o'clock, but we do have a little segment at the end of the presentations where we'll share some photos in silence, just in honor of the burial services that we're going to be showing you. Go.
Hi, I'm Jeff Masten. I'm the other director of Bluestem Conservation Cemetery. We are coming up on our 3rd anniversary in this later this month, and we are just operating at a pace that we didn't expect to, and we attribute that to the desired change, the interest of people to do something different, that the options and choices that are out there are limited, or more limited than people would like. And the projects that you've seen before, myself and others are working to show people that there are other ways that that we can pay tribute to our loved ones. There are other ways in which we can support other social purposes and practical purposes, water quality protection, kind of habitat protection. There's my dog Walter.
Oh, sorry.
And that's the kind of the common theme that you're hearing tonight is that each cemetery has its own uniqueness to its environment, and what you try and do is with a conservation cemetery is to ensure that you're not destroying that, but you're actually enhancing that and protecting that. And so we all set out to ensure that our actions are supportive of the land, supportive of the water, supportive of the kind of the ecology, not destructive. And it's a balance. It's a definite challenge to operate a cemetery while working to enhance something. As you know, you're using pieces of equipment, you're operating, equipment over the property itself. You're driving across it, you're walking across it. and you're also trying to enhance it at the same time. A lot of these properties have also had been degraded over time. So this is a good example of Bluestem, the fall before we took possession of it. This is a King's Grant property from the early 1700s. It had been agriculture since that time. More recently, it had been tobacco and corn and soybeans and lots of use of herbicides and fairly monoculture. The woods had been cut over, so the tree species were limited. All of these are factors that actually work to the advantage of a conservation cemetery because it gives you a palette to work from. So that same field looks like this now. In fact, now it's even perhaps even more enhanced than that. These are bluestem grasses. A bluestem is one of the prairie grasses that are throughout the country in the prairies. We started bluestem really because one of the biggest uh, ecological holes in the southeast is the early successional habitat. Prairies and early successional habitat are missing. They've all been developed or they've been converted into farms or forests. And so the species that live in these habitats really have very few places to go. So any enhancement they can provide actually is of great value to maintain and perhaps even provide new resources for the neotropical migratory birds and things like the bobwhite quail and several of the mammals and really the pollinators. The pollinators are one of the depleted groups. And so we worked hard to convert that cornfield into these prairie habitats with bluestem grasses and wildflowers. And those are some of our burial areas. We have six fields, and then we have 5 woodlands that are all part of our burial areas. Throughout this, we also have trail networks connecting people with 3.5 miles of trails, providing places for people to walk. So it's first and foremost, it's a nature preserve where there is a conservation cemetery that supports the conservation of the land. We also support conservation in the community as well with our work. One of our metrics, a big part of our metric is ecological diversity. And so we focus, as John Christian talked about, in creating the baseline and biological inventories, and then understanding what's there and what's not there. And as you create these new changes, you remeasure these same things. You use fire, you use planting, you look at what's out there. We use a lot of citizen science to understand what's there. eBird, eButterfly, North Carolina Butterfly Monitoring Program, these bio blitzes and bio inventories to measure all of these things. And then we plant a lot of trees, shrubs, and grasses and forbs and flowers throughout the property to enhance the diversity. Just alone by stopping the use of herbicides on the property, we have changed the transition zones between the fields and the forests. And then the forests, we can enhance further by bringing in, new starts and new plants and thinning in some cases and introducing fire. You've noticed that we've all talked about fire today. There's a bit of a fire bug in perhaps many of us, but the fire really has this incredibly important role in the Southeast in supporting certain species that need the fire to reproduce, to seed, and also it can reset a landscape very quickly. And as Laura said, the landscape responds quite quickly as well. Um, So we do a lot of work in all of these areas, which are kind of the ecological principles, but this is all connected to the cemetery. We're also working with families. We're also working with families to introduce them to these landscapes. If you all remember during COVID, the kind of where everybody was, they were outside, they were walking around. That was a reset. We were all using that fear. We were all using those experiences that we were faced with, and we were using nature to help restore ourselves and to help bring ourselves to a place of reckoning. That's kind of what a cemetery, a natural or conservation cemetery does. It provides this opportunity for a family to actually use all of their senses. When you're standing there and you literally have 25 bird species above you singing, that remains in your memory. And so when you go back to this cemetery, you don't see large headstones and a monoculture of grasses. You see the birds, the butterflies, the dragonflies, and these sounds, the smells, the whisper of the wind, whatever those factors are, they're instilled in our memory banks as part of our a memory of that experience, and it also kind of can really even aid in the generation of a reset for in our grieving process. The number of times you hear people say, "I didn't know that this was legal," or "I didn't know that this was possible." We all get people coming and visiting these services. So we have this exposure of thousands of people a year who are just at the burial services alone who get to experience it and say, huh, I don't have to have AstroTurf. I don't have to have, plastic chairs and metal chairs and embalming and all of these other things. So I'm going to turn it over.
You could keep going.
I can keep going. Okay. So we Heidi and I work as a team. We got into this because we helped our parents die at home. It was a very personal experience for us, but we also kind of recognized the challenges that we had in understanding and working within the opportunities that existed. And we had conservation experience. We're both have worked in the conservation world for 25 years. We brought that to the table in developing Bluestem, and it has really paid dividends. We first and foremost are conservationists who happen to run a conservation cemetery.
Right. I think all of you have said it so well. This element of connecting people with the land is truly the greatest gift for me in the work that we do. Exposing people who may not otherwise have thought about conservation or how we're protecting our natural resources is a great joy. And we have found so many families and individuals become even more engaged in our projects because of the fact that one of their loved ones is at rest in our properties. So I'll take just a moment to walk through the last few slides and share some images with you all. And then we do want to stop talking so we can answer some questions. And we so appreciate your attention. If we don't get to your question, make sure you send us an email. We're glad to be a resource for you. So I'll just pause here for a few slides. And we'll bring the presentation to a close. I'm happy to take us all off of the screen so that we can see each other's faces. And please, I don't have access to the chat, but maybe someone can put up their hand or send out a question and we're happy to answer them.
I can share with you what we've seen, some comments and questions. I'll read out loud and then someone can add in. Michael Furness says, looks in one of the earlier slides, I think from Freddie's talk, looks quite a lot like our site in Northwest California, which should be operating in about 2 months. That's awesome. HK says, each of your stories and images are so powerful, and you know how much each of you have moved me. When you presented at the LTA conference, what were some of the diversity of comments and concerns you heard from that audience?
I don't know that there, it was mainly interest, quite honestly. We've already been approached, Heidi and I have personally been approached by 3 of the North Carolina land trusts about how they could create something like this. I think it's a level of curiosity. You know, I know Heidi and I started going to Rally, when was that, 2018? 2018, and started presenting on this topic. So you know, it's quite a while, 7 years, that we've been really beating the drum, and we're starting to get the calls now. So I think it's a question of, I think what was stated earlier, it's a question of how do these work with a land trust? How, you know, is it mission creep for them to be involved with the project? And there are different ways in which a land trust can be involved. They don't have to be, as Heidi and I say, you don't always have to be the one doing it. You can also be supporting it or participating in different ways. And a conservation easement is one of those ways that they participate. In some cases, they own the land, as Freddie mentioned. In some cases, they actually operate the cemeteries. So there's different ways, and those are the kinds of conversations that came up in that presentation.
Thank you so much. I just have a quick follow-up, and maybe we can take this offline, but we're in the process of putting together a proposal for the New York State Land Trust conference. And so we just want to make sure we hit it out of the park. So I'll reach out to you separately.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
And I will just add in there, in terms of that relationship with the land trust, I think it's just simply important for the land trust to understand is you're not there to operate the cemetery. The land trust should not be the operator of the cemetery. You know, their role is to make sure that the conservation values of that land, just like with any other conservation easement, are being maintained year after year in perpetuity. That's their role. They're not there to be turning into people who do conservation burial. To me, it's that simple. So as far as the mission creep question, if anyone were to talk to a land trust, I don't think it's a good necessarily. Maybe there's situations where, yes, a group of people from the land trust want to be the people who start a conservation cemetery, but it's such a huge endeavor of its own that for a land trust to say, oh, we're going to do a conservation cemetery ourselves, as you know, oh, these staff people on their side are going to do that. No, it's its own thing. So again, the role of the land trust is to maintain the integrity of that conservation. Okay, next, there's a comment from Michael Furness. In a wild grassland with no above ground markers, how best to help family locate the grave after the biota has fully returned?
I think that it's important to create, before you begin these burials with families, an understanding that the biota returns and sometimes you're not going to see the grave.
Yep. And there are markers above ground, or you can have markers above ground. We all do. So there's different ways of marking your graves. Some can also use headstones. We offer, we have a marker in each grave, but in the center of each grave, but we also do offer kind of flat headstones. Some don't offer that. So it's really a choice. It's your personal choice. But ultimately getting to the grave is one of the big challenges on especially an open landscape. And that's what GPS helps with, but it doesn't always, it's only the accuracy of your phone to get you to the actual spot. And that's not always true.
I want to add too, I think what John Christian said is so important. It's the way we spend a lot of time with families in the very beginning when they're exploring a conservation cemetery. I talk a lot about our need to let go, of what we have imagined as a cemetery, because a conservation cemetery does not look like that and does not operate like that. So it's really about inviting people into this experience that's letting go of the ways we've imagined memorializing our people, and ensuring that this beautiful space is the memorial to their lives, because what they are doing in returning their bodies to the earth is helping to ensure this beautiful space stays protected long into the future.
And I'll
One
add one
thing
more thing
sorry.
on that, on the location of the graves as well. We are in the state of Florida required by law to maintain records of where each body is located. So we have a pretty extensive grid system for our cemetery. Everybody's got different ways of doing it, but the location is permanently recorded in all of our records, as well as the states and everything. Once that body goes in the ground, it's not unknown where that body is. Now, it may be, as I like to say, embraced over time. It will be embraced by the vegetation, but you can see where the area is, and you can get the measuring tape out or mark it off or whatever. So, it can be located in terms of, from a technical standpoint, that place is recorded. So it's not a random, it's somewhere out there. I mean, yeah, you can say that, but I mean, there is an actual the record keeping of that specific exact spot. So we don't open it up by accident and put somebody else and disturb it, is the main reason for that. We also have Anne Youngerman saying, thanks so much. I know many of your faces from NFHA going back, NHFA. I have a very early seed of an idea for a conservation burial ground on some family land in California. I'd be interested in getting direction on early steps towards exploring the idea. I think we'd all say, just, yeah, get into all of our CBA materials and research. So and join in all of that. So Susan says, I'm curious how Jeff and Heidi removed the crop tobacco ? Before planting the Bluestem. And also I'm hearing a lot in Ontario about using goats to manage invasives and as a replacement to prescribe burns. But tonight I'm taking away that fire offers something unique and irreplaceable. Hey, if it's a fire landscape, fire is your best bet, I will say. But then there are scenarios in which that's not feasible. So there are alternatives it's better. Some of the alternatives are better than nothing. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Well, we removed the crop by cutting it down, because it was corn that was on that site. So really what we were facing more of the bigger issue was what was going to grow there if nothing was planted. And that, there are thousands and thousands of weed seeds sitting in the ground ready to, grow at any time. And so that's what you really have to think about, is the competition for what you're planting versus what's going to come up just naturally. And so there's different approaches to dealing with that, and really depends on what you're planting and your climate and various other actions.
And I think some of the natural cemeteries have used goats for their invasives. I want to say Penn Forest did that, I think, back in the day. And actually, colleagues of ours down the road who operate a funeral home have just brought in goats to help take care of their invasives. So there are lots of creative ways. But for us, you did I didn't. You bush hogged, and then we planted the wildflowers and the grasses, and really been watching that. What Mother Nature chooses to help us with, because we have sort of jokingly referred to certain fields as the problem child, where it looks like there's nothing that's really nourishing or growing there. And then boom, 2 years later after fire, one of our problem child fields is probably the lushest one out there. I think it's the one that we showed the photo of the green bluestem. It's just doing incredibly well, which to me speaks to the value of why we're wanting to take care of these beautiful pieces of land in this way, very intentionally, very deliberately, very thoughtfully, knowing that we're giving back to something that this planet has given to us.
The other thing that I'll say, and this is my conservation brain speaking, but it really comes true at Bluestem, is that you're not looking at a clock of 1 year or 2 years. You're looking at a clock of 50 years. So what you see today is not being measured on what you see next year. You hope to see improvement, but it's really the long term. You're playing a long game here. These cemeteries are 50, 100-year projects. That means 50 or 100-year commitment and commitment beyond that. They're perpetual. This is looking at a completely different timeline and calendar than you've ever thought about before. But even when you are looking at year by year, perennial plants take 2 to 3 years to get established. So that first year, it looks ugly. That second year, it looks less ugly, but it's still ugly. And that third year, all of a sudden, everything comes in, and you're like, wow, what did we do? We just made something special. And so you really have to kind of think differently, look at it, look at the calendar, and give yourself permission to kind of dream about what it's going to look like and work really hard to get there.
There's
Yeah, and
one more question that has been brought up, I think is a really important one. I want to make sure we get to answer before we finish, but I don't know if-
Yep, go for it.
I just wanted to say in regard to Jeff's comment, I think what he said is also one of the things that makes the oftentimes the relationship between land trust, land conservation, and conservation burial so powerful is there is that perpetual ongoing nature of both, and that overlap is a really important component of that partnership, regardless of how you do it. They both are recognizing that.
Mhm. Sure.
Yeah, that's good. Chris Murray says a cemetery has to be maintained in perpetuity unless, at least in Virginia, yes, in Florida too, as does a conservation easement. Are the two protections not redundant? I would say they are absolutely not. They're protecting two different things.
Right.
So with the cemetery, the land use is a single use of being a cemetery. That's one land use. And there's all kinds of cemeteries out there that have mausoleums that are shoulder to shoulder, nothing but, grasses and headstones and plastic flowers, single use. Conservation easement is for land that has conservation value. It's, prairie land or flatwoods or forest or whatever the conservation value is of that land. So a conservation easement is protection of that conservation value. So a conservation easement can be protecting a hunting preserve for that value as a hunting preserve. As a conservation easement on a cemetery, it's protecting that cemetery as a conservation area. That means that the future owners, after we're all dead, those of us that are running these cemeteries, when we're gone and our mission is we're gone, that means the next few owners and the next owners, they are, yes, it has to be a cemetery, but it means it's going to be this beautiful conservation natural cemetery. It's not going to be able to be turned into mausoleums and niche walls and, all of the conventional modern cemetery that we see everywhere. So you're protecting the future of that cemetery to be a conservation cemetery. Does that make sense?
Well, and Laura, on top of that, you're bringing in a partner, you're bringing in a land trust, so a third party whose sole purpose is to protect that land and ensure that's protected. So you've got someone looking over your shoulder constantly, and they'll go to court to ensure that not only you do that, but they'll go to court to make sure that no one else encroaches upon your property. So they become your advocate as well in situations where there's outside actors. Maybe a road crew wants to come through your property with a new road. Well, that conservation easement is going to prevent that. And you've got this partner who's got legal standing and will back you up. So you've created these layers of protection that is much better than any singular layer of protection.
Yeah, that's an excellent additional point. Hadn't thought about that aspect of it, but that's really a good point. So, anyway, yeah, Lee just had a gardener's comment of when you were talking about the plantings and the time it takes. He said she said gardeners have a saying: first year you sleep, second year you creep, third year you leap. So
That's right.
About a number of plants. So that's all of the questions right now, and it's 8:21. You want to wrap it? Shall we wrap this up? Thank you so much, Heidi, for leading this this conversation, and thank you all for turning out to this. We really appreciate your interest. And as we said, this is being recorded and will be posted on our website or for our membership, and I don't know how else, but anyway, thank you all so much. Have a great night, and we look forward to seeing you at other things. Thank you.
Diane.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.